This is my 1972 Dodge Travco motorhome that I bought for the purpose to restore, refurbish, customize, whatever you want to call it. I watched the movie Barefoot with my wife, and on the movie they had an old Dodge Travco, and I told my wife, I got to find me one of those. I'm going to get it and I'm going to customize it. One of the first things I did is I replaced the rear axle. I bought a donor motorhome, which was a 1991 Georgia boy with a Cummins, 6B Cummins Allison A542 transmission and a Dana 80 rear end with 3.73 to 1 gear ratio. The Georgia boy also had 8R 19.5 tires, which are about 33 inches tall. That combination meant the Georgia boy would only be doing about 65 miles an hour wide open. For me, that was just not a good something. That was just not something I wanted. So being that I had a Dana 80, I was able to change the gear ratio from 3.73 to 1 to 3.31 to 1. I also went ahead and I got rid of the 33-inch tires, and I purchased some 9R 22.5 tires and rims, which are 38 inches tall. You'll notice that I cut the wheel wells out in order to make room for the tires. When I get around to doing the body work, I'll go ahead and rebuild my flare to make it look like the factory flare and then go from there. The old Travco was built on a Dodge frame and had a Chrysler 413 truck engine and a 727 torque plate transmission. I replaced both of those with the 5.9 Cummins and the Allison A542 transmission. One of the things guys do when they put in a Cummins into one of these projects is they use Dodge motor mounts on the Cummins engine, and they're able to bolt it in place without making any modifications. I didn't do things that way because with the Cummins sitting in place on the motor mounts, the radiator fan would bend through the radiator. The way the other guys deal with this is they go ahead and they use electric fans, and I wasn't interested in that. So what I did is I went ahead and installed truck motor mounts that came with the Georgia boy. The Georgia boy is on a Oshkosh chassis, which is a heavy truck chassis. Well, Oshkosh makes heavy trucks, and they built it more like a heavy truck other than a typical car or pickup. What I just showed you there was the front motor mounts, a single motor mount in the front of the engine, and the other motor mounts are bolted up here to the flywheel housing. This housing right behind the block is called the flywheel housing, and you'll notice that on either side are motor mounts, and that's a typical truck setup. This allowed me to push the engine back further since I was having to re-drill the frame anyways, and it's a much more durable and practical installation. There'll be 3 separate systems on this motorhome. There'll be the engine, battery, and its system, which is the lights that run them, driving lights and all that stuff. Anything to do with going down the road. The other system will be the house system, which will be underneath the berth, which is in the back of the motorhome. And the third system will be the generator, which will have its own starting battery, and they'll be all isolated from each other, except for if I want to marry them together, I'll be able to do that. I'm now in the back of the motorhome. And right here is where the berth was, and I've tore the floor out because there's some rot underneath the water tank. So we're going to rebuild the floor and put in completely new plumbing. Off on the right hand side here is a water cooled 4-cylinder generator. It's a Kohler 6.5 kW generator. I'm probably going to convert that to LP so it can run off the house LP system, since the motorhome's going from gas to diesel. I'll no longer have a big diesel tank in it, unless I want to add a separate tank for for the generator, and I'm not sure about that yet. And this is George. George is my buddy. Me and George have been working on this project together for quite a while. Right here's a box that I'm making. This is where my house wiring is all going to take place. I got a 12 position fuse block right here and an MPPT charge controller for my 245 watt solar panel, and this set of switches right here. This is going to be mounted on the outside of the door, and this will be for systems that I'll be turning on and off on a regular basis. I've also got a battery monitoring system where I'll be able to monitor amps in and amps out, and how much my capacity left in my house bank and everything. And that gauge will be mounted also on this panel. This panel, I'm not sure how I'm going to finish it out. I'm either going to laminate it or varnish it or something. I'm not totally thrilled about it yet, so hopefully at some point I'll become thrilled about it. You'll notice that there's wiring hanging loose all throughout this motorhome, and that is because I'm moving the wiring system, the house system, to the back of the motorhome, and I'm rewiring just about the whole thing. I will have gone through all the wiring before I'm done. The Dodge dash is coming out. I'm going to use the Oshkosh gauges on a custom dash that I'm making. The Dodge steering wheel is going to come out, and the Oshkosh had a tilt wheel, and it'll go in. Even the pedals will all be Oshkosh. So there'll be a lot of retrofitting. So you'll notice that there's a big gaping hole in the front of the motorhome where you can see outside, and that's where I'm trying to fit the Oshkosh radiator into the existing spot. This radiator right here laying on the floor is the Oshkosh's radiator. This one leaning up here is the original Travco radiator. As you can tell, the Oshkosh radiator is a lot wider. Behind the Oshkosh radiator are two intercoolers. The bigger one in back belongs to the Oshkosh. And you'll notice that where the intake and the hoses hook up to it, it's a lot bigger and it's a lot taller. So I think this intercooler for the Oshkosh and the bigger Oshkosh radiator will be a lot better for the motorhome altogether. And in order to put that radiator in, that's why I'm butchering the motorhome in order to stuff that radiator in there. I'm going to stuff it in and the intercooler. And then my next problem is, it's just like I did on the rear axle. I've got to go ahead and make room for the front axle. This tube you see on the ground here is the turbo, the hose between the turbo and the intercooler. It's made to run up on the top of the wheel well up there. And I got to make sure my 22.5 tires are going to fit and be able to move around without hitting that tube. This also applies to this Oshkosh Hydro Boost master cylinder, which I'm going to install. It mounts up underneath the driver's side wheel well. And then steering box mounts up underneath there also. And that's going to be replaced with the Oshkosh's setup. It's a lot more heavy duty. So what I got to do with that front drive axle, I'm going to use the Oshkosh's axle and springs, which means my spring hangers, which are right here, the springs are too short on the Travco setup, so they got to come off. And the Oshkosh's spring hangers need to be mounted. And then I need to get this thing sitting down on the axle with the 22.5 tires, and I can look up in there and see what kind of room I got. So that's a big challenge, but it'll be taken care of. This mess right here is just where I put some Bondo on that I'll sand down sometime, and it's kind of a test patch. You'll see that this motorhome is fiberglass. You'll see that the gel coat has flaked. The white is the gel coat, and it's actually relatively thick. And this thing has sat for several decades. It was bought new by the people I bought it from, and it's got all of 12,000 miles. My wife and I believe it was probably used as a hunt camp for a while because of the stuff we found inside. But anyways, we got to build. What I did is I took a scraper and I scraped the loose gel coat off, and then took a 60 grit sander and I sanded this area. and I'm going to use Bondo to build it up to the thickness of the gel coat in this area where there is no gel coat. Then I'll take a body file and I'll shape it and get it all down to size. And I'm going to run a tight coat of Bondo over the entire motorhome. Tight coat means you'll be able to see through it like you can right here. And this will be white when I'm done with little brown lines where it has filled in. Just to fill in the cracks. So that's how I plan to do the body work. So anyways, here's my motorhome. We've debated on what color to paint it or what to do there. My wife was kind of hinting at she wanted it to be a candy color, which is opaque or whatever. You can see through it. Basically, you shoot your base coat, then the more coats of the candy you put on, the more that color is going to show. The problem with that is this motorhome's a big canvas, and being that it is, the more you put on, the more it's going to show. If I don't put an even coat over the entire thing, I'm going to have light spots and dark spots. Now quickly over here, you'll see where I played with it, how I'm going to flare out my fenders, and it's not ready, and I got to tear it back out because first I got to scribe a line and get an even cut. But anyways, I wanted to see if my spray foam would fit. And what we got here is I'll spray foam in here, build it out with foam, then I'll shape it, and then I'll glass the foam and use the foam as a mold or guide. Well, that's my motorhome. That's where we're at, and thank you for watching.